7. I caught my Amish wife. Speaking to an English man, what I did next ruined us. My name is Joseph Stoltzfus, and I am 68 years old this autumn. I am telling this now because Rebecca died on the second Tuesday of last month, and the only thing worse than what I did to her in 1979 is the thought of carrying it silent into my own grave. I was 21 the summer I caught her at the back fence speaking to an English man with red hair and a clipboard. She was 20. We had been married 4 months. When I came around the corner of the milk house and saw her standing there, one hand on the top rail, her face turned up toward his, in a way she had never once turned it toward mine, I felt something inside me close, like a barn door in wind. I want you to understand that. Before I knew one true thing about that man, before I had asked her a single question, the door inside me had already shut. I grew up in a small district in Lancaster County, where my father, Amos Stoltzfus, was a deacon, and my mother, Lydia, was the kind of woman who served coffee to visitors with her eyes already lowered. We were not a cruel family. We were a careful one. My father used to say that a man is judged by 3 things: his fences, his wife's apron, and the silence at his own table. I did not understand then that all 3 were the same sentence. Rebecca came from the Byler farm 2 miles east. Her mother had died of a fever when Rebecca was 11, and after that she was raised mostly by her older sister, Sarah, who married out to Ohio when Rebecca was 16. So Rebecca was the last girl in that house, and her father, Eli Byler, was a quiet man with a long beard and a habit of staring at the floor when women spoke. I had courted her for 2 years. The courting was proper. We rode home from singings together. We sat in her father's parlor with the gas lamp turned low. I believed I knew her. I believed knowing a person was the same as watching them. The first warning came 3 weeks before our wedding. Rebecca's sister Sarah had written from Ohio, and Rebecca read the letter twice at the kitchen table, and then folded it and put it inside the family Bible instead of inside her own things. When I asked her about Sarah's news, she said, "She is well." That was all. I noticed she had put the letter where her father would not look, but where she could find it again quickly. I told myself sisters share private words. I told myself a married woman is allowed her own letters. I told myself many things that summer that I should not have told myself. We were married in November. The first months were what I had been taught to expect. Rebecca rose before me, kept a clean house, did not raise her voice, but she did not laugh. I had known her to laugh before our wedding. Once at a singing when a boy fell off a bench, once in her father's barn when a kitten climbed her dress. After we married, the laughter went somewhere I could not find. I asked my mother once, quietly, whether this was the way of new wives. She said, "A new wife is learning her place. Do not crowd her." So I did not crowd her. I watched her instead, which is a different and worse thing. In April, the English man appeared at our fence for the first time. I did not see him then. I learned about him from my neighbor, Jonas Fisher, who mentioned at a barn raising that a county man had been walking the back lanes, asking about old property lines. Red hair, Jonas said. Polite enough. Had a clipboard. I thought nothing of it. The county sent men out every few years to argue about culverts and easements. That was Jonas's word, easements, and I remember it because I had to ask him what it meant. The second time, in May, I came home from helping my father in the lower field and found Rebecca standing at our kitchen window holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She did not hear me come in. She was looking out toward the back fence, and her mouth was moving very slightly, as if she were repeating something to herself to remember it. When she turned and saw me, she set the cup down too quickly and said, "You are early." That was the first sentence in our marriage that sounded rehearsed. I asked her if anyone had come to the door. She said no. I asked her if she had been into the village. She said no. I asked her what she had been thinking about, standing at the window, and she said, "Sarah." Just that. Sarah, her sister in Ohio. I let it go. A husband who pushes too hard at a closed door, my father once told me, only proves the door was right to be closed. The third time was the day I caught her. It was the 3rd week of June, hot enough that the milk house stones were sweating. I was supposed to be at the auction in intercourse with my brother Daniel, but Daniel's horse had thrown a shoe, and we turned back early. I walked up the lane alone. I came around the milk house, and there she was at the back fence, and there he was, On the other side of it, red hair, clipboard, a blue truck parked 20 yards down the dirt road behind him. He was younger than I had pictured, maybe 25. He was smiling at her, and she was nodding, and her hand was on the top rail of the fence, and his hand was on the top rail of the fence, and between their two hands was a folded piece of paper. I did not shout. I did not run. I walked back the way I had come, around the milk house, into the barn, and I sat on a hay bale until I could hear my own breath again. When I came out 20 minutes later, the truck was gone, and Rebecca was hanging wash on the line, as if it were any Thursday in June. That night at supper, I asked her, very calmly, who the man at the fence had been. She set down her fork. The color left her face in stages. First her forehead, then her cheeks, then her throat. She said, "Joseph, I can explain him." I said, "Then explain him." And she opened her mouth, and she closed it, and she said, "Not tonight. Please, give me until tomorrow." I have thought about that sentence for 47 years. Give me until tomorrow. I have thought about what would have happened if I had given her until tomorrow, but I did not. I stood up from the table, I walked to the buggy shed, I harnessed the mare, and I drove 3 miles in the dark to the home of Bishop Yoder. This is the part I have never told anyone. I want to be careful here, because I have spent most of my life telling it to myself in a way that protected me. I told Bishop Yoder that I had found my wife meeting in secret with an Englishman. I told him paper had passed between them. I told him she had refused to explain. I let him understand, without quite saying it, that I believed the worst. Bishop Yoder was 60 then, a heavy man with kind eyes and a slow way of nodding. He said, "Joseph, go home, sleep. We will sit with her together tomorrow, you and I, and her father. Do not speak of this to anyone else tonight." I nodded. I drove home, and on the way home, between the Bishop's Lane and my own, I stopped at my brother Daniel's farm, and I told him everything. I do not know now why I did that. I have told myself, at different times in my life, that I needed counsel, that I needed a witness, that I was frightened. The truth I can finally say aloud, is that I wanted someone else to be angry on my behalf. I wanted my shame turned into someone else's outrage, so I would not have to carry it alone for one more hour. Daniel told his wife. His wife told her mother told 2 sisters. By Friday noon, the whole district knew that Joseph Stoltzfus's young wife had been caught at the fence with an Englishman. When Bishop Yoder came to our house on Friday afternoon, he came with my father, with Eli Beeler, and with a look on his face I had not expected. He had expected to mediate. Instead, he had spent the morning answering questions from half the women in the church. He sat at our kitchen table and he said to Rebecca very gently, "Daughter, will you tell us about the Englishman?" Rebecca looked at me first, not at the bishop, at me. And what was in her face was not guilt. It was something I did not have a name for then. I have a name for it now. It was the look of a person who has just understood that the one human being who was supposed to ask her first did not. She said, "His name is Thomas Riley. He works for the county surveyor's office. He has been coming to the fence because of my sister." The room went very still. "Sarah did not marry a good man in Ohio," Rebecca said. "She wrote me in March. She has 2 little ones. He drinks. He has put his hands on her. She wanted to come home, but father..." She looked at her father Eli, who was studying the grain of the table. "Father said she made her choice in front of God and she must keep it. So I wrote to a woman in the village who works at the library, and the woman put me in touch with Mr. Riley, because Mr. Riley's sister runs a house in Lancaster for women who need to leave their husbands." The paper at the fence was the address of the house. I was going to send it to Sarah. I was going to help her come home even though father said no. I want to tell you that I understood at once. I want to tell you that I crossed the kitchen and took my wife's hand. I did not. I sat in my chair and I felt every word she said, reshape every memory I had of the last 4 months. The cold coffee at the window, the letter folded into the Bible, the rehearsed sentence about Sarah, and instead of relief I felt a hot, ugly thing rising in my chest, because I understood that I had told the bishop, and I had told my brother, and by now the whole district believed something about my wife that was not true, and I was the one who had made them believe it. A wiser man would have stood up then and walked through every house in the district correcting what he had said. I was not a wiser man. I was 21, and my pride was a living animal inside me. So I did something worse. I let the bishop ask Rebecca whether she had defied her father, Eli Byler. And Rebecca, who could not lie, said yes. And the bishop, who had to live within his rules the same as the rest of us, said that a married woman who acts against her father and her husband in secret, even for a good reason, must come before the church. Eli Byler did not look at his daughter once during that conversation. Not once. I understood, sitting there, that he had known about Sarah's letters all along. He had known his older daughter was being beaten in Ohio, and he had decided that the appearance of a marriage held by God was more important than the body of his own child. And he had let Rebecca carry that secret alone for 3 months rather than admit, in front of the bishop, that he had chosen reputation over Sarah. He let his younger daughter take the punishment that should have been his. Rebecca was brought before the church on the second Sunday in July. She knelt. She confessed to going around her husband and her father. She did not name Sarah. She did not name Thomas Riley. She took the full weight of it onto her own back. She was placed under a 6-week ban, not the full shunning, but a smaller one, where a woman eats at a separate table from her husband and does not ride with him to service. 6 weeks of a separate table in our own house. I could have ended it any day. I could have stood up in church the following Sunday and said, "My wife was trying to save her sister, and I told the story wrong, and her father knew." I did not. I told myself the bishop had decided, and it was not my place to overturn the bishop. That was a lie. The truth was that to clear Rebecca, I would have had to stand in front of every man in that district and say I had been a fool and a coward, and I could not yet bear to be either of those things in public. So Rebecca ate alone at the small table by the window for 6 weeks, and on the last Sunday of her ban, when she was restored to the main table, she sat down across from me and she said, very quietly, "Joseph, I forgive you for what the bishop did. I will not forgive you for not asking me first." Sarah never came home. The address Rebecca had folded at the fence stayed folded in the family Bible, where it had been hidden under Sarah's letter all along. That was where I finally found it, 2 years later, when I went looking. By then, Sarah had stopped writing. We learned in 1983 that she had died of what the Ohio doctor called a fall down a staircase. She left 2 children. They were taken in by their father's people. We never saw them. Rebecca and I stayed married for 46 years. We had 4 children. We kept a clean house. To anyone outside our windows, we were a quiet, ordinary Amish couple growing old together. But the door that had closed inside me the afternoon at the fence never opened again on her side, because she had learned that summer that I was a man who would believe a stranger's silhouette over his own wife's voice. She was kind to me. She nursed me through pneumonia in 1994. She sat beside me at every one of our children's weddings. But she never once in 46 years told me anything important before she had decided what to do about it alone. I have spent a long time arranging the people in that story by how much they failed Rebecca. For many years I put her father at the top of the list. He had let his older daughter be beaten rather than admit he was wrong about her marriage, and he had let his younger daughter be shunned rather than admit he had known. Then for a while I put Bishop Yoder at the top, a man who should have asked more questions before he let a ban fall on a 20-year-old girl. Then for a while I put Daniel's wife, and the women in the village who carried the story faster than the truth could walk. I am old now, and I know better. Eli Byler was a frightened man who had buried a wife and could not bear to bury the rest of his certainty with her. Bishop Yoder was a tired man following rules that were older than his own judgment. Daniel's wife was a young woman who had been taught that gossip was a form of concern. The Englishman Thomas Riley was a stranger trying to do a small good thing in a place that had no room for his kind of help. None of them were the door that closed. The door that closed was mine. I shut it before I asked. I shut it because I had been raised to believe that a man's worth lived in his fences and his wife's apron and the silence at his own table. And when I came around the milk house that afternoon and saw Rebecca's hand on the top rail, what I felt first was not fear for her and not even jealousy. What I felt was that my fences had been crossed and somebody outside our family was going to know it, and I could not bear that. So I went to the bishop before I went to my wife. That is the whole story. Everything afterward, the ban, the separate table, the 46 quiet years, came out of that one walk in the dark to Bishop Yoder's house. The title of this story says that what I did next ruined us. I want to be honest about that word, ruined. From the outside, nothing was ruined. We had our children. We had our farm. We had our place at the long table at every wedding and every funeral. But a marriage is not the table. A marriage is what passes across it. And after that summer, what passed across our table was weather and crops and the small business of children, and never once again the private weight of a sister in Ohio, or a letter folded under another letter, or a hand reaching across a fence to try to save somebody. Rebecca died on the second Tuesday of last month. The hospice woman, who was English and very kind, asked me if there was anything I wanted to say to my wife before the end. Rebecca was awake. She was looking at me. I sat by the bed and I said, "I should have given you until tomorrow." Rebecca closed her eyes. She did not say she forgave me. She did not say she did not. She only reached out with the hand that still worked and laid it on top of mine on the blanket, palm down, the way her hand had been on the top rail of the fence the afternoon I caught her, and we stayed like that until she was gone. I keep the folded address in the family Bible still. Thomas Riley's handwriting. A house in Lancaster that closed its doors in 1991. I do not look at it often. I do not need to. I learned too late what it meant. It meant my wife was braver than her father, braver than her bishop, and braver than her husband, and the only one of us who paid for her bravery was her.